You are listening to the Break Time Tech Talks podcast, a bite-sized tech podcast for busy developers, where we'll briefly cover technical topics, news snippets, and more in short time blocks. I'm your host, Jennifer Reif, an avid developer and problem solver with special interest in data, learning, and all things technology. This time around, I have a few highlights to cover on a few different topics. I didn't really dive too deeply into any one thing this week due to a presentation I was working on, and then the schedule just being a bit more chopped up in general. So I'm catching up this week with a variety of smaller things that I tackled instead. First up is the Aura CLI, which has been on my list for a little while now. But if you're not familiar, Neo4j Aura is our cloud database as a service platform, and you can spin up databases from anywhere on the enterprise, high security, high availability spectrum to as kind of low level as a free tier that is always free. You can import data and play around with it and build proof of concepts. So the Aura CLI is the command line interface tool that you can use to interact with your Aura databases from a command line, from a shell or a terminal window. You install the CLI with pip is the command that's shown in the documentation. So you'll need some type of Python environment, which actually wasn't a problem for me, even though I'm not a Python developer. And I haven't really played too much with it just yet. I kind of was working with it and ran into a few different issues, but I am working through those again in just kind of little snippets of time that I've had this week. Feel free to try out this application or this tool. I'm really excited about being able to check on the status of databases and connect to things and play around with it from a command line tool, which I love command line tools, and I'm super excited to have one to work with databases. It is still early release of this. It's 1.0, but it is still new. So feel free to play around. If you run into issues or bugs, feel free to reach out and kind of work through those, and we'll try to get things up and running and updated, and maybe I'll even work on some content around playing with the Aura CLI. The next little bit I played with was a demo application that some folks at Neo4j internally had built. It's an externally facing public demo, but it's called NeoConverse. And this is a LLM plus graph demo application that lets users be able to chat with their data sets. It does have a couple of demo data sets that are provided out of the box. I'm also working on providing a couple of more. They used to be there, and then there were kind of some bugs, and so they were taken down, and I'm collaborating with a few people inside Neo4j to see if we can get those data sets hosted again and be able to add those back into NeoConverse just for some different and hopefully broader options for you to try out. But you can also load in your own data sets and chat with them through the LLM chat interface and just ask it questions about the data or what's here, how does this operate, or what does this look like, and it will do its best to pull the data from the database and show you images and answers through text and some information about what's there. I think this is really cool. I'd love to explore this more. I haven't really scratched any further than the surface on this one either, but just kind of playing around with it at the outset, I'm definitely interested to explore it some more. I also, last week, talked about how I was hoping I would put up a Spring Data Neo4j blog post for updating entities. And that blog post is now live. Hooray! You can check out jmhrife.com, which is my website, and find the blog section, and it should be listed there on the latest. I'm hoping to also post this to a couple of other blog sites, just haven't gotten it there yet, but it is at least up on my webpage. It goes into a little bit more detail. I mentioned last week in the podcast at a high level, kind of some things and what I was working on, the challenges I faced, but the blog post goes into much more technical detail on what we're looking at and how you work with things. I cover the save method that's provided out of the box through Spring, as well as some custom cipher options and then projections as well. Feel free to look at that and check that out if you're curious from last week's podcast. Then I wanted to give a huge shout out. Earlier in this month, I actually had a trip right after the new year down to Florida to do kind of like a mini Jug tour, so Java user group. And I stopped in Jacksonville for the Jacksonville Jug or Jack's Jug, and then the Tampa Jug. So I went from one spot to the next. And I really wanted to give a shout out to both of these groups. They were phenomenal events to work with. The organizers were awesome. I got some really fantastic, interesting, fun questions from attendees and people there, and just really enthusiastic and welcoming, really great experiences there. Also, if you're looking for places to get involved, if you're in the Tampa or Jacksonville area, I definitely recommend these two groups. But even if you're not, check out your local Java user group or whatever group happens to be in your tech sector. Lots have local options, but if you can't always make an in-person meetup, I definitely would check and see if they have some virtual options. Many meetups now do, so you could at least pop into the virtual meetup if you need to miss a night or the schedule doesn't work quite for you. Or even if you don't have one that's close or local to you, check out some of these other groups as well. Again, virtual opens up lots of options for you to pop into a variety of different places around the globe and listen to some content or whoever might be speaking and an expert on a topic, right? It's a really great way to connect and talk to technical people and just get ideas and bounce problems and challenges and successes and solutions off of one another. And if anyone is interested in speaking, but not really sure how to get started, feel free to reach out to me or other developer advocates in your network. And also several organizers, I'm sure, would probably love to help you as well get started. They're always looking for speakers. And remember that you don't need to be an expert. You can talk about your experiences, your challenges, your successes, the way you understand certain things. And I find that looking at it from here's what I know, or here's what I think I know, or here's how I think something works, that kind of removes the fear a little bit. You're no longer being the expert of this is the way it is. It's this is what I see, and this is how it's working for me with the knowledge and the environment that I'm dealing with. The content piece I wanted to look at today is I am a member and sign up for the D-Zone newsletters. And so I got a D-Zone newsletter, had several links, and I was skimming through those and saw a Refcard on Java application containerization and deployment. And it's an author I know. It's written by Mark Heckler, so I opened it and kind of worked through it. It walks through building containers and also offers options for native builds, deployment, and maintenance. I really found this was a good overview of the key points of containerization and things you might want to know about if you're working with containers. For instance, just building a Docker container on the outset, and then also dealing with native builds, what they are, how they work, how they're different, then deploying those to clouds or what have you, and then maintaining those, updating them, and keeping everything in sync and so on. This Refcard I found, it is a reference card, so not everything might be new, especially if you've worked with containers before. Some of it might be review, but I really liked the step-by-step where it explains each command and why it's needed. It doesn't make assumptions about what you know. And sometimes that really frustrates me about a lot of technical content out there, is they assume you're an intermediate or advanced level. And even if you are intermediate and advanced, that doesn't mean you know everything about everything, right? There's going to be certain little gaps or missing pieces that you might not know, some of those intro concepts that feed into your intermediate or advanced level skills. And that's okay. But I love when content kind of takes a step back and brings some of those intro concepts and at least just kind of guides you along for that, even if you don't need those intro concepts, or maybe you do, and that's super helpful then. So much of the time, developers copy and paste code, but then they don't know what it's doing or how to alter it when it doesn't work to fit their scenario. This D-Zone Refcard helps explain for better understanding. You know what each command is doing. You know what each argument is doing. So then I can determine what I need or what I need to change if my situation is different. I find that super helpful and super valuable. Today's style was a bit different, with bursts of progress on a few smaller tasks from my list. I looked at two, at least new to me, Neo4j items, the Aura CLI tool and the NeoConverse demo application. Then I read the D-Zone Refcard on Java application containerization and chatted about why I really enjoy content that helps me understand the technology rather than just showing the code and the result. A great refresh and review for my containerization skills. As always, thanks for listening and happy coding.